Most people in St. Augustine have heard of or have been to Treaty Park. Maybe you've walked the trails, watched a baseball game, or brought the kids to the skate park.
But very few people know what the treaty in Treaty Park stands for. This park is named after one of the most important and controversial events in Florida history.
Not far from here, in 1823, the United States government met with Native American leaders to negotiate what would become known as the Treaty of Moultrie Creek. That agreement would reshape Florida forever and help set the stage for the longest, bloodiest, and most expensive war ever fought between the United States and Native Americans, the Second Seminole War. To understand the treaty, you need to imagine Florida 200 years ago. Florida was wild frontier country. St. Augustine was one of the only major settlements. Dense forests, swamps, rivers, and open prairie covered most of the peninsula. The original indigenous people of Florida had been devastated by disease, warfare, and colonial conflict during the Spanish period. Over time, new native groups moved into Florida from Georgia and Alabama. These groups included Creek-speaking peoples, the Miccosukes, the Yamassees, and others, including escaped African slaves. Over time, they became known collectively as the Seminoles. But tensions were rising fast. In 1821, Spain, no longer able to defend her claim, transferred Florida to the United States through the Adams-Onis Treaty. Almost immediately, American settlers wanted more land, and the federal government wanted more control over Florida.
Officials in Washington viewed the Seminoles as an obstacle to expansion. And that brings us here, to Moultrie Creek.
In September of 1823, 425 Native Americans gathered near Moultrie Creek, just south of St. Augustine. The United States government arrived with soldiers, officials, interpreters, and negotiators. Representing the native groups was prominent Miccosukee chief named Neamathla. The negotiations were not between equals. The United States had military power, political control, and increasing numbers of settlers moving into Florida. The Seminoles faced enormous pressure. Eventually, the treaty was signed. Under the agreement, Native Americans in Florida would give up nearly all of their land claims and move into a large reservation in the center of Florida. The reservation stretched from present-day Ocala down toward the Tampa Bay area. Importantly, it was intentionally placed far from the coast. American officials wanted to isolate the Seminoles from outside trade and influence, especially from Cuba and the Bahamas. In exchange, the government promised protection, food, livestock, farming tools, schools, blacksmith services, and annual payments for 20 years. On paper, it sounded like a compromise. But in reality, it marked the beginning of forced removal. For many Seminoles, relocating to the reservation meant abandoning villages, hunting grounds, farmland, and sacred places tied to generations of history. Conditions on the reservation were difficult. There were food shortages, poor land in some areas, and growing pressure from American settlers created constant tension. And despite the treaty promising 20 years of peace and stability, the federal government did not wait 20 years. Less than a decade later, officials pushed another agreement called the Treaty of Payne's Landing. This new treaty demanded the Seminoles leave Florida entirely and move west of the Mississippi River into present-day Oklahoma.
Some Seminoles argued that they had been deceived, bamboozled. Some refused to abandon Florida. Conflict exploded.
In 1835, the Second Seminole War began. Fewer than 2,000 Seminole warriors held off an American force that numbered more than 30,000 troops. It became the longest, costliest, and deadliest conflict the United States fought against Native Americans. Today, Treaty Park is peaceful. People come here to play sports, exercise, and enjoy a little nature. But the name of the park is also a reminder that major pieces of Florida history happened right here around St. Augustine, not just at the fort downtown or on St. George Street, but in places like this. The Treaty of Moultrie Creek changed the future of Florida. It reshaped, or depending how you look at it, devastated Native American life in the territory, opened up more land to American settlement, and helped trigger decades of conflict that reverberates in Florida history today. And standing here now, it's strange to think that this place was once the site of negotiations that changed the entire state.
So the next time you visit Treaty Park, you'll know the story behind the name. This is a site of a turning point in Florida history. Hey, thanks for watching. For more local St. Augustine content, don't forget to like and subscribe.